always check your children's Halloween candy. Always. I'm not saying this to fearmonger. To tell you the truth, I realize that most of the candy handed out on the holiday is likely purchased at Walmart the day before and shoved into a plastic pumpkin-shaped bowl. You probably have realized that most sane people don't poison candy, or put glass in it, or whatever cautionary urban legend you've heard. The only guy who did do that did so to his own son. So those neighbors of yours, don't treat them like criminals. They're just trying to innocently give the kiddos some sweets. This warning regards a phenomenon that has no apparent origin. What I mean is, no one is really sure of where it comes from. The candy in question isn't even so. You can't purchase it at any stores, and looking it up online results in, well, no results. The candy, this aforementioned phenomenon, appears to be that of a cinnamon jawbreaker, not to be confused with the Atomic Fireball brand or any other similar sweet. It may resemble a red-tinted gumball or a red lollipop with no stick. The point being, it's rather generic in appearance, which makes it tricky to spot the real deal. The candy is sometimes branded under the H.H. Sweets Company, a corporation that doesn't exist, at least not one registered by any agency since 1999. If you search the internet, you might find some H.H. Sweets businesses, but I assure you, they aren't the real deal, merely a namesake coincidence. If the label carries the H.H. name, beneath it a tagline will read something to the effect of, "Hot as hell, sweet as heaven." Not all of the candies sport the branding, but it certainly helps to spot it. This is why I advise, if you find yourself, or your kids, with an unmarked red candy, the safest bet is to throw the sucker away. Documentation of the phenomenon only dates back to 2007, but there is the possibility that it's gone on for far longer. As of this recording, a known 9 people have ingested the candy, 4 of which being children under the age of 18. Each case has happened on October 31st, with most cases occurring during 2016, with a total of 3 victims. The only clues as to the candy's appearance and branding is through the eyes of witnesses, and subsequent investigations of any nearby and opened candy wrappers. Each of the victims' corpses, aside from the heads, remain untouched. The heads, however, are where things get strange. Each of the heads is completely burnt, like a used match. This would make identification of the victims troublesome, except for the fact that fingerprint analysis lent itself fittingly to the nature of these deaths, considering the hands of the deceased were completely intact. None of the victims were related in any way, with the only exception being a father and his 9-year-old daughter, Andy and Mary Kay Winfield from Lexington, Virginia. All of the others shared no relation, other than the aforementioned candy. An eyewitness report from Brevard, North Carolina, documented the full story behind the mysterious death of a 12-year-old boy, Shane Davis, who died on the Halloween of 2009.
I was leaving the pharmacy around 8:30 when it happened. He was walking on the block in a zombie costume. I didn't notice him at first because it was dark, and his costume was dark. But then there was this flash of orange light, like someone lighting a candle. I turned around and this heat wave hit me in the face, and the smell, oh Lord. It smelled like cooked meat. His head was on fire. There were people screaming, but there was nothing we could do. He screamed only for a moment, then he hit the pavement. I'll never unsee it. There were rumors it was a hex from a witch or something. I'm not a superstitious man, but when you see something like that, superstition doesn't seem too far off, you know?
Similar reports were documented for many of the other victims. Shortly after ingesting the candy, the victim's head would burst into flames, and soon thereafter the victim would succumb to the injury and die. Many rumors and theories have since popped up surrounding deaths in the candy. Many include witches and spells, but some have garnered significant following beyond regional folklore. One of the most popular rumors cites the deaths as a result of the 1782 execution of Henry Hyson Cassidy, H.H. Cassidy, a a candy maker from Ononcock, Virginia, the site of the first documented death from 2007. Cassidy, a local candy maker, was placed on trial for the disappearances of 2 young girls from the neighboring town. Despite having no apparent motive for abducting 2 young girls, the candy maker was charged as a reasonable suspect, having access to sweets for alluring the children. Following a local investigation where one of the girls' bodies was discovered with candy in her pocket, Cassidy was charged with the murders and sentenced to death. Children from the town who once loved the sweets made by the candy maker began calling Cassidy the Witch of Ononcock, making him one of the earliest male witches of legend. Being found guilty in a hasty trial, Cassidy was sentenced to death by molten metal, a process considered barbaric, except in the case of an accused witch. Cassidy, who swore innocence until his death, had a molten metal ball dropped into his throat. While a quick death, it was certainly not painless. The townsfolk remarked that justice was served on that day, and the body was buried in a shallow grave. Given that Andy and Mary Kay Winfield were also from Virginia, many speculated that the spirit of Cassidy returned to punish those responsible for his death, using his signature candy as a way to torment the descendants of his accusers. The name, too, H.H. Cassidy, would explain the name on the wrappers, H.H. Sweets. Another popular theory is usually referred to as the jack-o'-lantern story. Based on the Irish myth, the story goes that a man known as Stingy Jack tricked the devil on multiple occasions, resulting in his banishment from hell, as well as heaven, as he was a trickster at heart. The man, forced to roam the earth, lit coal within a turnip and has been using it ever since to light his eternal path. The story, clearly rooted in the Halloween tradition of carving jack-o'-lanterns, has been used to explain the candy, too. Stingy Jack, as he's referred, seeks out souls to join him in his eternal punishment. The candy, which burns the heads of its consumers, turns them into a somewhat crude jack-o'-lantern. This would explain the fiery demise of the victims, as well as its connection to the celebration of Halloween. In conjunction with the Stingy Jack narrative, there are some who conclude the candy is the work of the devil himself, tormenting unsuspecting holiday celebrators with death merely for the fun of it. A rather sick trick, yes, but then again, mischief is commonplace in the celebration of Halloween. As for this theory, the HH label would stand for Hell's Hottest, or some other variation of the Hell alliteration. Despite these varying backstories to the candy, there is a far more grounded explanation that many have subscribed to. Rather than reading into the HH Sweets mythology, some conclude that HH Sweets is precisely what it claims to be, a candy company. The motive for committing these crimes is, at large, still a mystery, but this theory cuts out the claims of ghosts and devils, suggesting that instead a select few of sickos had the willpower to conjure up sweets with the intent to kill. In the end, no one theory is correct, at least not one that can be confirmed by traditional means. A candy that is, for lack of a better term, supernatural, can only be explained by the supernatural, making it extremely difficult to verify any of the information regarding it. If you wish to avoid the grisly results of the candy, it is advised to always check your children's Halloween candy. Better yet, avoid the trick-or-treating tradition altogether. Or, if you're highly concerned, perhaps it would be best to simply skip Halloween altogether. Having difficulty staying awake there? Trying to study for some big exam, finish some last-minute assignment that you put off all weekend, and it's now 3 a.m. and you are absolutely exhausted? Or perhaps you were in a similar state recently and are looking for help on what to do. Well, friend, I have just the prescription to ease your weary mind. All you need to do is win a game. Setting up the game is relatively simple. All you need is an hourglass, a candle, and a marker. Let me make one thing specifically clear. You need an hourglass, not one of those rinky-dink 30-second pieces of shit you get out of a cereal box or a board game. Before playing the game, Test your hourglass to make sure that it takes an hour or slightly longer to drain out all of the sand from one section to the other. Having it take slightly longer will help, but too long or too short and you'll run into complications during the game. You must also be completely alone in the room while playing. When you are ready to play, choose any room that can be sealed, simply meaning that all doorways and windows can be closed. Any other form of timekeeping device or alarm must be taken out of the room prior, or the game will not begin. The hourglass will be your only time tracking tool, hence why having an accurate hourglass is important. Anything with an electronic display should also be removed. This includes TVs, cell phones, computer monitors, anything. Leaving them in the room during the game will put you at a massive disadvantage. You may begin the game at 8 p.m. Make sure the room is sealed, drawing the curtains to block any outside light. Then draw a simplistic hourglass shape on the back of one of your hands. Make sure to remember well which hand it was, since you'll mostly be in the dark for this game. Take the candle and light it. Then turn off the lights and sit down on the floor with the 3 previously mentioned objects close together, and flip the hourglass so the sand begins to fall into the empty half. The only source of light should be your candle. Now, yell something along the lines of, "I'm not tired and I refuse to go to sleep." Close your eyes to the count of 10 and open them again. You won't be entirely sure, but somewhere in the room you'll think you can see the shadowy outline of a man. You've now begun the game, and your opponent is none other than the master of sleep himself, the Sandman. Do not provoke him, and don't speak to him either. You've challenged him, and in a way insulted him about his profession, so he's not in the best of moods to say the least. Now comes the game. Your task is to stay awake as long as possible, to a maximum of 8 hours, which will take you to 4 a.m. Every hour you must flip the hourglass to reset it and keep the game going. Each time you flip the hourglass, you may take the marker and draw a tally mark on your arm. The specifics of which arm you mark will be explained later. And don't think you can just flip the hourglass 8 times really quickly or just draw 8 lines on your arm. The hour needs to pass in order for the magic to work. If you fail to flip the hourglass before the very last grain of sand falls, or should you succumb to sleep, you will lose. During this time, the Sandman will be deploying as many tricks as possible to get you to fall asleep or to give in. See, the bottom half of your hourglass at any time represents his power. The more sand in it, the stronger his influence will be. Almost immediately upon starting, you'll begin to feel drowsy. This is merely his presence. If you can't last against this, stop playing immediately. During the first hour, he won't do a lot. He may walk around the room, but he won't touch you or speak to you. Even if you try to talk to the being, which is something you should really avoid doing, there will be no response. Also, don't move from your spot to approach him. The closer you get, the more drowsy you will become, and if you're not near your candle, he may put it out so you can go to sleep. Do not distract yourself during this time. You may easily lose track of time and forget to flip the hourglass on time. The Sandman can also skew your perception of how much time has passed, but he cannot affect the hourglass, so keeping your focus on that is your best chance of winning. Side note, if you try to leave the room, you will find that the doors are all locked and the windows reveal nothing but an unyielding darkness as far as you can see. After you pass the first hour, the Sandman may scoff, but will continue to stay in the room. Now he will begin to pull more from his bag of tricks. He's seen that you're going to be a hard one to put down. The sounds of music boxes and harps may be heard, at first from a distance, but will slowly grow to a level that would be audible and comforting. Resist the urge to close your eyes and listen. Your body will grow weary as you approach hour 2 or 3, depending on how the Sandman is feeling that night. Around this point, he will begin speaking to you in many voices. The soft voice of a young girl, the wise cackling laugh of a grandparent, or perhaps even in the ever-loving, recognizable words of your own mother. They will try to congratulate you on surviving for so long with the Sandman, for braving sleepless days and nights to win this game. Whispers of lullabies and nursery rhymes will fill your head. But you know better. Say nothing and ignore the voices. No matter how real they may seem, don't listen to them. Do not go to sleep. If you manage to make it to the halfway point and now have 4 marks on your arm, you'll be nothing less than exhausted, and the Sandman will be nothing less than enraged. He will begin to manipulate your environment even more and start using new tactics to get you to sleep. Instead of trying to lull you to sleep, he will attack you. Hallucinations will occur. You'll see horrifying images of the dead hanging from the ceiling, flashed by a spotlight of unknown origin. The room may start to close in and then stretch out, and close in again and stretch back out. A whisper in your ear will turn into shouting in your face from an invisible source. Already weakened and sleep-deprived, your remaining energy will be drained and burst from his terrors. You may have sudden adrenaline rushes, sure, but the Sandman is clever. He'll time them so that you can't just survive to the next hour by simply being anxious. He'll wait until your emotional state has fallen just another level lower, and then bam. 2 rotted feet dangling in front of your face. You can scream all you want, you can beg for him to stop. But this will only use up more of your ability to function. At the 6-hour mark, the hallucinations will shift between horror and comfort, while the Sandman will begin to pick your brain and find what nightmares caused you to come to a cold sweat many a night. Others will coax you towards slumber, claiming that you've put up with enough and that you deserve your rest. A warm bed to tuck yourself into, a pillow made from the softest furs and feathers. The harps and music boxes will start to overload your sense of hearing. In your state, you may welcome the chance to sleep, but snap out of it. Have you been watching the hourglass? Make sure his terrors aren't distracting you. This is why you don't talk to the Sandman. For every tiny detail about yourself you give him, he will use against you here. This is also the part where electronic displays can become a massive problem. They will turn on, regardless of whether they are powered or not, and should you gaze upon their mystifying image for too long, your eyelids will droop and your body will collapse onto the floor. If you had just turned the screens away, the Sandman might use some muscle and turn it back towards you so you can get a better view. The curtains may open to a brilliant dawn or a clear blue sky, but the only truths in this room are your arm and the hourglass. Unless you have 8 marks, this game is not over. Use any ounce of strength you have to flip that hourglass, now an immense chore from the Sandman's influence. Scrawl a line down your arm with a marker, even if it looks like you're taking a knife and slashing your own arm open. During the final hour, the Sandman will begin to address you directly, asking you questions that appear to be simple. But, as you are, you can't even remember what 2 + 2 equals. A question is the hardest thing to get out of your head, so don't let it get in. Cover your ears and just watch the hourglass. Keep those eyes open. Don't fall asleep. If the question gets in your head, you'll start to think about it, adding more stress and draining you of what little mental will you have left. It might become hard to breathe, as if someone is squeezing your lungs or the air is dense and hard to take. The Sandman will also get physical, grabbing you and throwing you across the room, leaving you to crawl back to the hourglass before time is up. If you catch a glimpse of his face, it may be enough of a nightmare to haunt you and keep your eyes from shutting. There will be no distinguishable facial features, save 2 bloody eyes, the lids torn from the sockets, endlessly staring. If you can't take it anymore at any point before the 8th hour is completed, take the hourglass and break it with all your might. Both sections must be broken for the game to end. For your sake, I hope it was made of glass. anyone who has made it to the 7th hour mark has never had the strength to successfully break it, and either carried on or surrendered to their dreams. You will not receive a reward for ending the game this way, save the mercy of avoiding the Sandman's wrath. If you do make it to the end of the 8th hour without falling asleep, you will not need to flip the hourglass again. Simply make the 8th mark on your arm and close your eyes. Though you ended the game, you cannot sleep just yet. There's one final task remaining. All you must do is wait for the Sandman to collect the hourglass and say, "You're all grown up now. Sleep when you wish." Open your eyes and find that the hourglass is gone and the candle put out. Now you may collapse in slumber, a 12-hour slumber to be precise. The game puts a heavy strain on your mind and body, so recovery is necessary. But it's the last sleep you'll ever need, or at least to that length, because once you've fully recovered, you will be able to stay awake for an extra hour for each tally on your marked arm. Depending on your normal sleep schedule, this may mean you only need a small nap, maybe an hour or two at most, but for some, you'll never have to lie down again. Sure, you will have the ability to do so if you want to. You can even still dream. But there will never be any weariness following you. Just think about how productive you can be. But it's not all sugar plums and gumdrops. If you mark any tallies on the arm that was not marked by the hourglass, you will instead require more sleep. 1 hour for each tally on the blank arm to be precise. You will require more rest to be able to even function throughout your day. Now, these marks can cancel with the ones on your marked arm, but if that's not the case, you may have just gone through all of that suffering, only to come out worse than before. And what with your delirious state throughout the game, it's unlikely for the average individual to come out with all their tallies on the marked arm. There are also the circumstances of losing. If you fail to flip the hourglass, then the Sandman will gain full power, and with the snap of his fingers, you will collapse to the ground. Regardless of how you fall asleep, be it by failure of the hourglass or succumbing to your own tiredness, you will also sleep for 12 hours to recover, but it will be the worst sleep you will ever have, and the Sandman will make damn sure that's the case. The worst nightmares will flood your mind, leaving you unable to escape or wake up in a relief filled with cold sweat. All you can do is endure the torture of a dream that feels like years in length. And when you finally come to consciousness the next morning, there you will be, lying on the floor of the room, the marks still on your arm and blood flowing from where your eyelids once rested. You said you refused to close your eyes and to go to sleep. The Sandman has simply granted that wish. Have you ever wondered if it is possible to visit the afterlife without actually dying? The saying goes that you can only go to heaven or hell if you're dead, but this is not entirely true. You can indeed have a brief visit to the afterlife and meet your dead friends, relatives, and even God. Sounds good, right? But there is one catch. It's not exactly easy. Many have returned as changed individuals. Some even chose to take their own lives afterwards. Many lost their sanity, and only a small percentage remained what you'd call sane after their journey. Even though they all refused to describe what they saw, I'm different. I have been to both heaven and hell several times. In this article, I'm going to describe how to visit hell and meet some of your dead relatives that have sinned throughout their mortal lives. For the journey, you will need to be a well-rounded individual with a strong mentality. Otherwise, you will not be able to cope with what you will see. Most importantly, you will need to have killed somebody at least once in your life before you try this. First, head to your nearest church from 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. on a Sunday night. If the door is locked, gain entry somehow. If it's impossible, then try the second closest church. Once inside, approach the altar and kneel down in a praying position. Then, in a monotone voice, repeat the following scripture clearly. Volo viscere, terram ubi, cruciabitur, igne, et sulfure, quod cuique secundum modum sibi aeternum, massae flumina, ripas oboribus non crescit multa milia passuum, ubi pax non est. If done correctly, you should fall asleep instantly and wake up in your room. There will be a piece of paper on the end of your bed. On it, there should be a link to a website. Now, this link will vary from person to person. Find an old computer with no internet connection or any means of communication to the outside world, as you do not want the most horrifying demons imaginable to know your location. Boot up the computer, load up an internet browser, and enter the link. Despite the lack of internet connection, you should be directed to a black page with a hyperlink in the middle stating your name and date of death. Whatever you do not click on the hyperlink. Instead, save the page and view the HTML file in Notepad. Scroll to the bottom of the document. There should be an address. Make sure you write it down. Once you've finished with the computer, take it as far away as you can, destroy it, and never return to the church you visited again. A week later, visit the address you wrote down. It should be an old abandoned warehouse that was never there before. Do not enter this building yet. Instead, knock on the door exactly 6 times. Any more or less, and you will be greeted by the devil himself and damned to a place far worse than hell. If all is well, an old man should open the door and hand you a blank CD with the words Hell.exe written on it. Run this on another PC you're willing to sacrifice with no inward or outward communication. On the CD will be 2 files, Diablo.jpg and Hell.exe. Do not view Diablo.jpg. It will cause you to rip your eyes out, but don't worry, it does not have a thumbnail. Just run Hell.exe. Instantly, your monitor will start flickering, and gruesome pictures of the mutilated corpses of your dead relatives should flash quickly on and off your screen. Then, a window will pop up with 2 buttons, one saying come, and one saying leave. Now is your last chance to turn back. If you want to visit Hell, then click on come. If not, click leave. You will fall unconscious and wake up in your bedroom with no memory Hell.exe even existed. All evidence of its existence will be lost. If you choose come, the window will close and the computer will spontaneously combust along with the CD. Do not leave the room you're in. Just let the flames spread until the heat knocks you unconscious. You should wake up on a hospital bed in a dark room with no clothes on. Do not get out of bed. Just lay there. After about 5 minutes, 2 people should enter the room. I cannot be any clearer on this. Keep your eyes tightly shut when they approach your bed. If you look at them even once, they will rip you to pieces. They will discuss in familiar voices how unfortunate your death was and describe it in complete detail. This coincides with the date of your death you found on the website. Cover your ears if you do not want to hear your own fate. Afterwards, they will leave the room hastily. Wait about 10 minutes, then exit the room. Once you have exited the room, you should be in a very long corridor with the lights out. Start walking down the corridor. Once you have walked about 3 kilometers, all the lights should turn on. When this happens, run. Run as fast as you can down the corridor until you reach a fire escape door. Throw yourself through it at full force and then slam the door shut behind you as soon as you burst through. You are now in limbo. Your surroundings should be a large desert-like wasteland with no signs of life. Search the vast emptiness for a sharp rock or a cliff edge, something you can use to end your own life, basically, as in order to reach the gates of hell, you need to kill yourself in limbo. Be cautious when exploring. Even though this isn't hell, there are some monsters lurking about in caverns that will try to turn you into one of them. They're not as dangerous as the monsters you encounter in Hell. Just unbaptized souls cast in limbo to expend eternity endlessly exploring the dark cavern systems. Before killing yourself, you must remove your eyes from their sockets and deafen yourself somehow. You should only have your sense of touch, taste, and smell left. You cannot ever see or hear Hell. If you value your sanity, that is. Don't worry. Once you return to the human world, you will have your senses back. When you wish to leave Hell, simply shout this Latin phrase as loud as you can. Est non satis. I cannot provide any more instructions. I feel that if I give away any more information, I'll be putting myself at risk. But there is somebody who recorded their findings, a man named Ian McGowan. He successfully went to Hell and returned. Shortly after, he brutally murdered most of his family and then hung himself. So, when they found his body, there was a note in his possession. In it, he describes what he saw in detail.
If you're reading this, then I've done the unforgivable. I've killed the people I care about the most in the worst possible manner, but I did it to save them from a fate far worse than a painful death. Last week, I tried to visit my dead father in Hell. He was a raging alcoholic that would come home from the pub and beat me and my mother. He died from liver disease when I was 13. I wanted to see him get what he deserved. What I experienced in Hell was something mortals should never experience in their lifetime. After blinding, deafening, and finally killing myself in the fucking wasteland, I awoke in what felt like a furnace. It was so excruciatingly hot, and I couldn't move. I began to hear voices in my head, and they all said the same thing. Help me. The voices were of many people I knew that had died. They grew louder and louder. My surroundings got hotter and hotter until I stopped. Everything stopped. And then saw something that I could not begin to describe. I saw every sin and act of violence, greed, bloodlust, and gluttony played out at the same time in my head. I had the worst feeling of, how can I describe it? Melancholy I've ever experienced in my life. I felt as if nothing mattered anymore. That's when he arrived. Suddenly, my sight returned, but all I could see was darkness. And something appeared in front of me. I cannot describe its appearance. All I can say is that it was not human or even a recognizable being, but an entity of pure, unadulterated terror. I knew this was the devil. He talked to me telepathically in no recognizable language, but I somehow fully understood what he was saying. He told me the fate of the universe and what I must do. My duty. I owe him my soul. 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 I owe him my soul.